My name is Bianca Holman. I'm a local news journalist in Central North Carolina.
How does covering local media kind of differ from national news?
Well, as you know, national news often gets their news from us, those who are on the ground embedded in the community. And I think the biggest difference is that as a local news journalist, we are in the communities where we report, right? We are embedded. We are at the supermarkets. We're at the nail salon. Our kids go to school in the community that we live and report in. So there is a trust that's built with local news journalists that I think our viewers really value. They know that we live here. We are impacted by what happens, whether it is in local government, the school system, healthcare, all the things that happen to people living in our community. We feel the impacts as well. So I think that there is a level of trust that's built with the local news journalists in wherever you're living and wherever you are. And then also there's relationships. Oftentimes we're going back to the same PR professional or to the same expert or to the local schools, to PTA, presidents and things of that nature, and to the communities that are being impacted and really building those relationships. And I think that's what matters most. And that is what really sets local news apart from national news outlets.
How has local media changed over your career? And also, how do you kind of see it persisting in this really digital and social age?
I think that local news reflects what's happening globally. What's happening in our day-to-day lives in many industries is that there's so much going on. There is a large demand for content on so many platforms 24/7. So local news, we are now streaming more often than what was previously done, right? I know for my outlet, we not only are on live linear, like on your television, but on YouTube, on our website. Also, we have our devices in our hands. So whenever you want to know something, you're looking on your phone, you're looking for the latest update, you're looking for the latest alert. So you have to feed the beast. There's more content being produced. There's more stories and different angles, and there's always something going on. So I think that has been one of the biggest things that has changed within local news and even national news is that you're just on constantly 24/7. And so that can put a lot of demand on journalists, always staying on top of everything and being sure that you're not just going shallow in the story, but you're able to build some depth in the story and follow up on many stories. That can sometimes be a challenge. It's something that we take pride in when we are able to revisit a story. If there was an incident that happened, talking with the family, talking to others that were impacted, and maybe taking it out broadly and seeing if there's a trend here. So when your newsroom is able to do a follow-up story, I think we take a lot of pride in that, is that we haven't forgotten. We're not just a one and done. We're not going to helicopter in, drop in for the day. No, we're going to come back and revisit this and check in on you. Something that I think about, especially with our community in Central Carolina and North Carolina in general, was, the impacts of Hurricane Helene, right, in Western North Carolina, still recovering. There are people here in Central North Carolina that are continuing to be impacted because here where the capital is. So I think that is something that has changed throughout the years in media and in journalism, but it's something that also provides opportunity because there are so many different stories out there and you can access people a lot quicker, right? There can be something that goes viral on social media and you're like, hey, we need to jump on this, and you can quickly access people and there can be an immediate response. But also with that there's the opposite side of it where it can become a little bit cumbersome and overwhelming, and you have to continue just to put forth your best effort, continue to have a high level of integrity, and to be honest and transparent and share the process. And I think journalists take value in that because we take pride in our work and we build up that trust and responsibility on what we're reporting and in our communities.
Such a good point about, helicoptering in and just how you're, rubbing shoulders daily with the people in your community that you're covering. I guess what sort of place does it have in your heart being able to be so close to the stories, daily?
My personal experience impacts my view as a journalist. So before I dived into local news, I was a teacher, and I view my impact in a similar way. As a teacher, you have your classroom of 27 kids, right? And you may not notice the impact that you have on them that school year. You can see some small changes, but then maybe it's 5 years later when they come back to your classroom, they're like, hey, do you remember that moment we did this? Or do you remember that moment we did that? I view local news as the same. You are having an impact in the community that you live in, and you are the historian of your community that you live in. And so you're able to see the impact that you make, I think, a little bit more immediate. National news, of course, has its place, and I think local news and local journalists will always have their place in our media cycle and here in globally, because it's boots on the ground that make that difference that you're able to see nationally. And there will always be a place for local news journalists and people to report on what's happening in their communities, and also knowing that as local news journalists, we are putting in the research. We are making sure that we talk to the proper experts and the officials, and holding people accountable and getting eyewitness accounts and using some history to put context in place for a lot of people. It's not just telling one side of the story, it's putting that story into context and what this means in a broader sense for people. So I look at it in a similar way, as that you're able to see and feel and experience and hug the people that you impact on a day-to-day basis. So I think that is why local news will always have a place in my heart, because I relate it to my experience as an educator on, you may not be able to teach 1,000 kids in one school year, but bit by bit, it builds up. And you think about your time of telling one story a day, but that's gonna build up. You're gonna tell over 200 stories a year. And then you're in a community for 5 years, it compounds and it compounds. And so I think, we take a lot of pride in that as a local news journalist, and that's what stands out to me and why it matters so much for me.
A great way to explain to folks about the importance of local journalism.
Mhm.
I know we're winding down on our time here, and I'm cognizant of that, but is there one source or editor who you'll always remember, and why is that?
So there are so many mentors, editors, stories that have really impacted my life as a journalist throughout my career. But there is one that's most recent that I do want to highlight, and it's about a deadly domestic violence incident that we reported on. And it was that day, or maybe that next day, that I ended up uploading the story and the follow-up story to my TikTok page. And it really caught a lot of eyes. A lot of people were clicking on it, watching the video, commenting on it. And of course, it happened here in North Carolina, but the young lady who was killed, she was actually from Washington, D.C. And there were eyes from there that were getting word of what had happened, because of course her loved ones, were impacted up there. And there were a couple of people who reached out, who shared and made comments about the story. And there were a couple that had reached out to me, and they had recognized, like, wait, you used to teach up here. And that really kind of stood out to me. And they kind of commented, thank you for covering this story. This is such a terrible situation. I'm so upset that this happened. So I think it highlights just how much what we do matters, and that people want to share their stories. And again, just telling and sharing what has happened in your community has a ripple effect. It's that one drop into the lake, and then you see the ripples outwardly that can ripple an entire, lake, right? A glass of water, and then it just kind of, echoes out. And it's so important of what we do, of sharing the stories that's happening in the community, and also following up, because there was a follow-up. Her family ended up coming down, they ended up doing a memorial, and it's a very, very difficult time to go to someone who's lost a loved one in such a violent and tragic way, and for them to be open and share their experience. And even a young lady who was very close to the victim, I ended up talking with her because she had actually witnessed the situation. And after the story, I said, hey, please talk with somebody. You witnessed a violent situation, and my heart hurt. I was tearing up. And it's so often that does happen, because you are talking to someone in their most vulnerable moments, and we have a heart, and you have to just take the cap of doing your job off and be human with people and say, talk to somebody. You've witnessed violence. You have experienced trauma. This should not have happened. This should not be happening. And please talk with somebody. Because we have reported on so many stories where you see witnessing violence and being in a traumatic situation has ripple effects in someone's own life. So I think overall, it you continue just to have a heart and be genuine in telling those stories and sharing people's stories and being sensitive that this is someone's life and this could easily have been my life. And when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, I think it really shows in your storytelling and the way you portray and you do your job, and which is really important. And so I take that very seriously because, again, the people and the stories that we share, we could easily be in that situation, and you try to keep that at top of mind. So I think that story just impacted me because it just showed me the ripple effects of our storytelling and how it doesn't just stay in the community. It travels and that information gets out. And so it can it can impact someone miles away. So that's when I think about it, those are the type of stories that impact me the most. When you get that email of, hey, thank you for covering this, or you're able to share a sensitive moment with somebody and they say, thank you for letting me talk about this or highlight this important subject or this loved one that I've lost. I think people respect that and they can see that you're genuine and you want to make sure you do right by people. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I think that's the easy way of putting it. But again, it was just an example of the work that we do locally having a greater impact states and miles away.